Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 1989 comedy drama film Parenthood. Now, Parenthood is honestly one of my favorite Steve Martin films, and I would probably say one of the best comedy dramas out there. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on Parenthood, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this video. And if there is another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon or my Cash App. The link to all three is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, Parenthood is directed by Ron Howard, and this was a film that he really campaigned hard for. This was his idea because he was a new parent and he really wanted to make a movie about the reality of parenthood, the comedy of it, but also the drama, the uh, real true to life take on parenthood, something that wasn't too polished and too Hollywood and too fake. Like he wanted to do something that was a lot more relatable to your average audience member. And his direction in this, while you might not necessarily think that it is that particularly impressive, considering the fact that it's a comedy drama from the late 80s, but to me this is one of Ron's best films directing wise because Ron was at a level here where he was just on a roll. And he even admits that in interviews when he's talking about directing this film, because he had just finished working on Willow, working with George Lucas, and getting a crash course in filmmaking for 3 years. And once he got out of that, he really had graduated and become a significantly better director. And this was his first film that he did after he gained all that experience. So he mentions that, yeah, there were some days that were maybe a little hard, but for the most part, it was rather seamless. It was surprisingly easy for me. And he mentions how this was one of the easiest and one of the most least challenging films that he directed because he just felt like he was in tune with the source material, with the topics and with his cast, but also he had this newfound sense of confidence in himself as a director and his abilities that he utilized for the first time here and knocked it out of the park. And even though it is a drama with comedic elements, there still are some moments directing wise when it comes to the way he frames his shots or the camera work that is quite impressive. There's actually some really nice POV shots at points. There's some good floating camera work. There's some good traveling shots or tracking shots, establishing shots. They shot the majority of the movie on a set inside the studio, and he did a great job making it look like it actually was shot in a real suburb, and these were real homes, and these were real environments that weren't just built by a set designer. He did a good job making the houses have their own personalities and also just finding a way to get so many authentic and strong and great performances out of this massive cast and not really having a moment where when he was directing these little mini movies, which is really in a lot of ways what Parenthood is. And sometimes when that happens, one mini movie can be directed better than the other. And that wasn't the case here. Now, Parenthood is written by Lowell Gans and Babaloo Mandel, and It's based on a story by Gans and Mandel and Ron Howard. And to me, this is a great script. I think this is a really wonderful, heartfelt, emotional, and witty and laugh out loud hilarious at times screenplay that does, in my opinion, an exemplary job when it comes to detailing the various different trials and tribulations of parenthood and also life in general. And the film centers around these four siblings, the Buckmans: Gil, Helen, Larry, and Susan. Gil is a sales executive who's trying to really get a promotion at work, but he's running into issues there, and it's definitely showing up in his home life. His wife is Karen, who is the anti Karen, by the way. She's just a total sweetheart. And she's thinking about going back to work, but then she finds out later that she's actually pregnant with what would be their fourth child. So that puts a wrench into some things, because that's also around the time when things are getting very tumultuous when it comes to their lives, because there's a lot of turmoil that's going on with Gil and Karen, with their kids, specifically with Kevin, who is their oldest. He's got emotional issues. It's not explicitly detailed that he's autistic, but he's definitely somebody who shows traits of being on the spectrum, because he's struggling in social situations. He's struggling with emotional outbursts, which is something that's very common with autistic kids. And I know this because I was one. So when I see Kevin acting out and him getting freaked out emotionally at different points throughout this movie, I see a lot of myself in that kid. And that's definitely another reason why this movie really really sticks with me. But it's not just that, but I definitely think about my parents a lot when I watch this film, because of the fact that, I was that kid who was emotionally having issues and was struggling with things. And, my parents are probably going through a lot of the same things that Gil and Karen were, where they're like, oh, we love our kid. We don't want to send him to some kind of special school. We want him to stay here in the school that he's been in and where his friends are, where he's, trying to figure things out. And we want to make that work. That was handled also in a way that was very respectful, and it didn't feel like it was exploitative or anything, when it comes to Kevin and his issues. There are other things that I can connect with as well, because, for instance, that whole scene when Kevin winds up having his retainer thrown away in the garbage at Showbiz Pizza. Well, at school one day, I mistakenly threw away my retainer, and my mom actually had to get off work early and then come to the school and then dumpster dive to get my retainer back. So that is actually something that happened to me. So that's a real life experience that I can actually associate with this film's plot and this script and everything that Kevin was going through. I never really had a birthday party though with a cowboy who makes balloon animals, but there are definitely still some similarities. And I really love the way that the two writers portray Gil and Karen and everyone else in this script as real people who have flaws. They're not perfect. And I really like that, and it just makes it all the more relatable and personable as a result. Like Gil, he's got issues of being oblivious sometimes. He doesn't necessarily always understand the consequences of his actions, but he's a nice guy, and he's a loving father, and he wants to do what's best for his kids, and that's when he does the whole thing with Cowboy Gil and saves the birthday party because the original cowboy uh, wasn't able to show up at the party, and so he takes it upon himself to save the day and make a great birthday for his kid, for Kevin. And he stands up for Kevin when the school was thinking about kicking him out earlier. And he has a lot of these hopes and dreams for Kevin, and also has fears that you see throughout the script, which I also really liked. I like the fact that it shows a dream of Gil's, of seeing his son Kevin become this valedictorian, this big, popular, well-adjusted, confident young man who, during his graduation ceremony at college, is personally thanking his father for his success, but also fearful of, well, my kid dropped the baseball during the baseball game, and he shouldn't have been in second base, and now he's getting picked on, and now he hates me, and now he's mad at me, and now he's gonna be a school shooter, and he's gonna be shooting bullets at me and other people, and yelling on top of a tower, "You made me play second base." Is it necessarily a realistic scenario? No, but a lot of parents, that's not really what comes to their mind. They kind of have a lot of these extremes going on when they think about their kids. They think about the best possible situation or scenario for them when they're older. And then sometimes they also think about the worst one. So I like that there was a balance there of both of those potential outcomes when it comes to Kevin growing up. Things have wind up working out. Gil, he allows his son to continue to play baseball, and he winds up catching the baseball in the next game to win the game for his team. When he stood up to his boss and he quit, and then he had to essentially go back to his old job later, it actually worked out in his favor because he actually got a raise. By the end of the entire story, like, he realizes that life truly is a roller coaster. So Gil, a lot of ways, he's the guy, out of all the siblings, who's trying to just keep the family together. He is definitely the one that probably provides most of the laughs too, because he's just constantly trying to carry everything and fix everything to comedic effect. Like the whole bit when he's asking his daughter if she feels sick and if she wants to throw up, and she throws up all over him, which actually is a real experience that one of the writers had with their kid when they went to Disneyland. And the whole scene where the power goes out and he's trying to find a flashlight and accidentally grabs a vibrator, which, that scene is laugh out loud hilarious. That is such a side splittingly hilarious scene when it comes to this movie. It cracks me up every time that I see it. Not just Steve Martin's shocked look, when he realizes what he's holding, but the reaction by Dianne Wiest, and just the way that everybody else in the family just reacts to it. Karen has to come up with some uh made up explanation for what that is off the top of her head because one of the kids asks what it is, and so she has to be like, it's an electric ear cleaner. And then the kid's like, that's really big. So there's just a lot of fun moments that are associated with Gil and Karen and their story in particular, which makes sense. The Steve Martin, it's his whole thing. Like the birthday party with the kids when he's Cowboy Gil and he talks about the other cowboy guy, and he says that, I killed him. He looked at me wrong, so I killed him, and I put a hole in him this big. And the kids are like, that's too small. This big. Come on. And then this big. And they're like, oh my God. And they're like, yeah. As his guts were spilling out. Like, that's a really fun scene, and that's a well written sequence. A lot for Steve Martin to work with as a comedian. And then other stuff like when Karen overhears a conversation with one of Gil's sisters, that when her husband's feeling tense, sometimes when they're on the road, she gives him roadhead. And so Karen hears that Gil is feeling tense when they're driving away from Showbiz Pizza. And so she tries to give him roadhead, but they wind up crashing the car. And then you have the whole thing with the officer who asks Gil, like, so what happened? So how did this happen? And then Gil turns to his wife, is like, honey, why don't you show him? So there's a lot of just really hilarious moments like that. But a lot of it definitely is within this particular part of the story. There are some other moments though that are funny and definitely do provide some chuckles when it comes to some of the other stories, but really a lot of it is in Gil and Karen's story. There are other stories. There is a story involving Helen and her kids. Uh, so she has two kids. She has Gary and Julie. And Julie is her older kid. It's her only daughter, her older daughter. And Gary's the younger one. And Julie's dating this kind of flake of a guy named Todd, who definitely has a lot of stoner traits. Definitely doesn't seem like he's the smartest guy. And eventually they become a couple. They actually get married after Julie tries to run away and go live with Todd, and then they wind up getting married, and Julie winds up getting pregnant, and so there's a lot of conflict uh, with Julie and her mom as a result of this, and you can just really tell that Helen is just she is frazzled. She's at her wits end. She's a single mom too because her husband is his dentist who just left her with the kids and doesn't want anything to do with the kids. Has his own family now with different kids. It doesn't want to have anything to do with his other kids. Uh, which leads to a very heartbreaking scene with his younger son Gary when he tries to call his dad to ask him if he can stay with him for a while, and his dad tells him no. And Gary's a problem child. He's acting out. He's going in and getting porn and watching porn and hiding it from his mom until she eventually finds it later. And that leads to an awkward but kind of funny talk about the porn tapes. And Todd winds up becoming an unlikely friend of the family, where he starts having heart to hearts with Gary, gets through to him in ways that uh, Helen can't, and he's really genuinely a guy that she starts to warm up to, despite his issues. And of course, prior to all of that, though, that she was understandably upset about Julie being with him because she found these photos of him and Julie that were very provocative. She wasn't supposed to see them, but she picked up some photos for work and it happened to be the wrong photos. And that definitely was one of the funniest moments when it comes to this particular plot, this subplot in the movie, when she's reacting and looking at all the photos, which, by the way, that's actually another real life experience that I think Brian Grazer had. So they incorporated that into the script. And eventually, Helen, because she sees that Julie loves Todd, even after Todd risks his life and almost crashes, well, he does crash. He almost crashes and dies while he's racing a car. She pretty much keeps the marriage together because after the stress of seeing Todd almost die, Julie's thinking about leaving him, and then Helen puts her foot down and is like, "This is marriage. Get up there. Be with your husband. This is what it is." And then that leads to a moment between her and her son Gary, where Gary he really looks up to his mom, and they have a nice heart to heart. And Gary even gives his mom permission to keep seeing this biology professor that she's been seeing, and he's the one that ultimately is the father of the next addition to Helen's family, because she is the one that winds up having a baby by the end of the film. Now, the other subplot, the third one, deals with uh, Susan and Nathan, and they have uh, they have a daughter who, I think the daughter, yeah, her name is Patty, and it's played by the same actress who played the girl and the little girl in Problem Child 2. And Patty, she's being raised by her father to essentially be kind of a mini me version of him. He's teaching her all these things, showing her how to be really smart and more well read and educated beyond the normal uh, thing that you typically see when it comes to kids her age. But he's become so obsessed with it that it's affecting his relationship with his wife. His wife wants to go on a vacation in Mexico, but she just wants to do it with her husband, but he essentially guilt trips her into taking her daughter along, and because it'll be a nice learning experience for her and she can learn Spanish. And eventually it just gets to the point where Susan can't deal with it anymore and breaks up with him with flashcards, because it's the only way that he can actually pay attention to her, because he's become so obsessed with training his daughter to become this next genius. And I appreciate the fact that the writers didn't hold back when it comes to the way they write this character. He's honestly a dick. He's a selfish prick, and you really feel for his wife, and you understand why she breaks up with him later, because he has become so obsessed with making his daughter into this genius that he's completely forgotten about his wife and her needs and her wants and her desires. And it eventually works out, though, because he realizes that he's been too far up his own ass and been way too obsessed with his daughter, and he sees things differently now, and he goes in and sings their wedding song when he bursts into his wife's classroom one day and starts singing the wedding song, and then they get back together, and then she winds up having another baby. She's pregnant by the end of the movie. She wanted to have another kid, but there was a dust up between her and her husband Nathan, and that's probably another reason why she broke up with him, because he was like, oh, we're not ready for that yet, because that's going to affect the development of Patty, and made it all about him again. And so it all worked out, though, because she still wound up becoming pregnant by the end of the movie. And you have a fourth story that deals with Larry and his son Cool and his father Frank, who is the father of all of the siblings. And Larry is the popular sibling. He's the one that the dad loves more than any of the other siblings. And he loves Larry the most because Larry idolizes his father, says all the right things, buys him gifts whenever they meet up and whenever they see each other. And I think his father sees a lot of himself in Larry. So Frank sees a lot of uh, his traits and the things that he believes in his youngest son. And so when he's talking about all these things that he's done throughout his life so far, all this money that he's made, all these different deals that he's trying to make, it's something that connects with him on a deeper level than any of his other kids. And because of that, a lot of the other siblings definitely have a certain sense of resentment towards Larry. Well, as the arc continues, Frank starts to realize the same things that his other kids do when it comes to Larry, about him being a flake, about him being, in a lot of ways, a loser, because he's just trying to do all these get rich quick kind of schemes, and they fall through, and he winds up in debt, and he's really in trouble now because now he's uh, really a target of the mob, it seems like, because he owes them like over $20,000. And so they're going to kill him if he doesn't give them the money, and because he made some bad bets. And he winds up getting his father to help him out after there was a confrontation between the two when he almost sold his father's car um, without his father knowing. This is in my opinion, less of an arc for Larry and more of an arc for his father. That's where a lot of the interesting stuff lies when it comes to this arc. Because the father's presented, honestly, as kind of a deadbeat dad for a good chunk of the story. His relationship with Gil is not good. Gil understandably thinks that he's a bad parent. He's drunk at all of the weddings of all the siblings. He's treated Gil like crap over the years. And because of what he's now starting to realize about his favorite son, Larry, that he is not who he thinks he is, that he is a flake, that he is, in a lot of ways, a loser, he goes to Gil for advice on what to do with Larry. And there's even a moment where he shows a little bit of emotion where, he just, you know, he loves Larry and he loves his kids. And, he definitely, it seems like he's showing some remorse for how he raised his kids. Uh, Not just how he raised Larry, but how he raised Gil and the other siblings. And what happens is Larry takes his father's money again and basically just decides to go to Chile and do another get rich quick scheme and leaves Frank with his son Cool. And Frank asks the kid if he wants to stay with him, and he forms a really close bond with Larry's kid because he's now realized the error of his ways. He's now realized that when he was a parent before, he made all these mistakes. So now he's learning from them and he's a better parent for this young boy. And I really like that. That was really sweet. How you could take something that was so negative with the Larry just leaving his kid there and going off to try to make some money in Chile and not deciding to actually take up any sort of responsibility for his actions and stop gambling and stop trying to make his mark and be an adult, but instead he does the opposite, and now it's up to his father and to raise this kid. And instead of shirking the responsibility, Frank is like, no, I'm going to do it. I'm going to raise this kid. And by the end of the movie, it's really in a lot of ways a cycle repeating itself, where the parents that were parents, now they're parents all over again. All the siblings have new kids, and their parents also have another kid, which really ties into the whole message, which is all about how life is a roller coaster. Some people want to be on the merry-go-round, but all it does is just goes around and around and nothing happens. And when you go on the roller coaster, you experience the thrills and chills and the ups and downs, and there's just so much more to it. So there's a lot of really poignant things in this script. There's a lot of things that make you think. Once you've had some responsibility, once you've grown up. As I used to watch this a lot as a kid, I didn't really get a lot of the deeper messaging and discussions in this script, but now I do. Like when Steve Martin's character has this moment where he says, "My whole life is I have to." As an adult, that really sticks with you. You can't just not go to work because you don't feel like it. You can't you can't, skip certain things. You can't not do something. You have to do it because you're an adult now and you have certain responsibilities. You have to pay your bills. You can't just be like, "Oh, I'm just going to skip it this month." You can't. You have to pay them. Otherwise, they'll shut off your power. They'll shut off your internet. They'll, bury you in late fees. Like, you have to do those things. That is definitely something that definitely sticks with you. Or the bit when Gil is looking at his kids and realizing that's me. They're not a blank slate anymore. I'm seeing myself in these kids. Um, and I think the roller coaster analogy is just so perfect, and it really does fit for any experience that you have in life, even if you're not a parent. I think there's a lot that you can connect with and relate to when it comes to this film. And just the way that it seamlessly integrates all of these different multiple stories with these different parents and their kids is it is honestly impressive. It really is. It's a very impressive script in that regard because that's a hard thing to do, and it's a hard thing to do well. And it's also a hard thing to balance comedy and drama as well as this script does. So, yeah, love this screenplay. Uh, and it's a big part of why I love this film. Now, the cast is stupendous. Like, it's a tremendous, terrific cast. I mean, you got Steve Martin as Gil, who, despite the fact that he never really had any kids at this point and didn't even have kids until he was 67, you couldn't really tell. It was a great performance by him, playing the father who's trying to raise 3 kids and trying to move up in his job and dealing with all the different stresses and trials and tribulations of adulthood and being uh older and being a parent and still having those signature hilarious Steve Martin comedic moments. We still got that sharp wit. Like after his daughter throws up on him and then he's all like he makes an exorcist reference, where I was just waiting for her head to spin around. And just a lot of great little moments. And honestly, I feel this is one of Steve Martin's best performances overall, and definitely one of my favorites. I love his performance as Gil. He's the kind of dad that I think a lot of people wish they could have had. Um, Mary Steenburgen is sweet and just really charming and funny in her own way as Karen, and she had some really great chemistry with Steve Martin. You really bought that they were two uh, uh, parents that really not only loved their kids but really loved each other. And the rest of the cast is equally as good, equally as great. I mean, Dianne Wiest as Helen, she deserved an Oscar nomination for this. She was amazing, funny, but also really believably emotional and distraught and relatable, and just a great performance by her. Really good role for her to work with as well. Just definitely perfect for her in terms of her own sensibilities and her strengths as an actress. Jason Robards was great as Frank, the father, especially when it comes to the scene when everything starts to really hit him when it comes to the enormity of what's going to happen to his kid and also what he did, and what he didn't do as well when it comes to him being a parent. Rick Moranis, he was fun, not in it a ton, but it's always fun to see Rick Moranis as Nathan, and did a good job playing a kind of a jerk, really, and showed his range that he can play that kind of character well too. Not just the lovable, nice guy. He can play the guy who's fake nice, who is just trying to do all this stuff for his daughter, but completely ignoring the effect that it's having on his spouse. And speaking of a spouse, like Harley Jane Kozak does a really wonderful job playing his wife Susan. Tom Hulce played a great flake, a great jerk off in his own right as Larry. That was a guy who you really wanted to, like, after a certain point, you wanted to just smack him because this guy just does not want to take any responsibility for himself or for his actions. And he's also affecting the life of this kid, and it's just so frustrating. But it's a really good performance by Tom Hulce. And Martha Plimpton as Julie, she did a solid job. Keanu Reeves, pretty much playing Ted again, but it works for his character in the film. Dennis Dugan played a good jerk asshole boss of Steve Martin, and then you've got other performers like Joaquin Phoenix as Gary. Uh, Really great performance by him as a young actor, especially the scene when he's on the phone and he hears that his dad just doesn't want anything to do with him. It was some really great acting. Uh, and then, Eileen Ryan as Marilyn, Helen Shaw as the grandma. I think this was her last acting role before she passed away. Jason Fisher is Kevin, Gil's son, um, and Yvonne Schwann, who plays Patty, the daughter of Rick Moranis and Harley Jane Kozak. So, yeah, one of the best casts you could ever possibly think of or ever get for a film like Parenthood. And some good cinematography by Donald McAlpine. Definitely does have some nice moments where it looks really nice and cheery and fits the overall tone and vibe of the film well. The editing by Daniel P. Hanley and Mike Hill, I think, definitely accentuates the film effectively. And the music by Randy Newman, yeah, it's kind of cliched, but it fits with the movie and the overall tone and the atmosphere of it. And it's got a great song that I believe, yeah, it was nominated for Best Song. I Love to See You Smile, but I don't think it won the Oscar for that song. But I definitely would say it's one of his best songs, Randy Newman. So, and for a movie that's over 2 hours, it never really felt like it was that long to me because I was just really invested in the characters and these families and their lives as if they were people that I actually knew personally because it did such a good job fleshing them out and making them all feel real. So that's my in-depth review of Parenthood, and until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.